بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. So we're going to take some verses here and there, inshallah, from this explanation of Surah Al-Insan, the chapter entitled Al-Insan, which is in the second to last juz part of the Quran. And this chapter has lots of admonition and reminders, and it discusses that which takes place before. It discusses before man, during his life in this dunya, as well as the hereafter. And so we're going to take a few verses. We do not want to tire the people out, so we'll take just a few verses here and there, and hopefully, bi tawfiqillahi subhanahu wa ta'ala, we can finish it. And this explanation we're taking from Shaykh Salih Al-Fawzan. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, هل أتى على الإنسان حين من الدهر لم يكن شيئا مذكورا إنا خلقنا الإنسان من نطفة أمشاج نبتليه فجعلناه سميعا بصيرا إنا هديناه السبيل إما شاكرا وإما كفورا إنا أعتدنا للكافرين سلاسل وأغلالا وسعيرا. Allah Ta'ala said, wasn't there a period of time for man where he was not a thing that was even worth a thing that was mentioned? Indeed, we created man from a nutfa that is mixed in order to test him, so we made him a hearer and a seer. Indeed, we showed him the way, whether he be grateful or ungrateful. Indeed, we have prepared for the disbelievers chains and shackles and a blazing fire. So here, the Shaykh, he says, Hafidhahullah, he says that this chapter, Surah Al-Insan, is a chapter that the Prophet ﷺ, he used to recite it on the day of Jum'ah during Salat al-Fajr, along with Surah Al-Sajdah. So he would pair these two chapters together for Salat al-Fajr on the day of Jum'ah. لِمَا فِيهِمَا مِنَ الْوَعْظِ وَالتَّذْكِيرِ, because they contain, both of these chapters, they contain strong admonition and reminders. And it explains Bidayat al-Insan wa Nihayat. It explains the beginning of man as well as his end. قال الله سبحانه وتعالى, Allah Ta'ala said, هل أتى على الإنسان, wasn't there a time for man, or didn't there come upon man? That is, هل, he says, بمعنى قد. قد أتى وليس الاستفهام إنما هي للتحقيق والتقرير. قد أتى على الإنسان. Indeed, there has passed upon man a time when he was not anything worth mentioning. Al-Insan huwa Adam wa dhurriyyatuh. Man is referring to Adam as well as his offspring, because the word Al-Insan can bear different meanings. It depends on the context. Here, it's referring to Adam as well as his offspring, all of mankind. قد ذكر الله سبحانه وتعالى في هذه السورة أحوال هذه الإنسان وهي أحوال ثلاث. Allah mentions in this chapter different situations for the person. There are three. الحالة الأولى, the first of them is ما قبل خلقه, how it was before his creation, where Allah Ta'ala said لم يكن شيئا مذكورا, when he was not something that was even mentioned. Right? There was a time that passed where man was not something that was even mentioned. He didn't exist. الحالة الثانية, the second condition, or the second situation, وهي ما بعد خلقه وابتلائه وامتحانه في هذه الحياة الدنيا. And this is after his creation and his being tested and tried in the life of this world. And then the third حالة is حاله في الدار الآخرة بعد البعث والنشور. His condition, his situation in the hereafter, after resurrection and the people being gathered together. So the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, هل أتى على الإنسان, أي مضى عليه ومر عليه. That is, there was a time that passed man. أحين من الدهر, a period of time, يعني وقت من الزمان لا يعلمه إلا الله, a period of time that only Allah Ta'ala knows. Only Allah Ta'ala knows. وَذَلِكَ قَبْلَ خَلْقِ آدَمَ. This was before the creation of Adam. لَمْ يَكُنْ شَيْئًا مَذْكُورًا. He was not anything mentioned. He was not anything. يعني كَانَ قَبْلَ خَلْقِهِ لَمْ يَكُنْ شَيْئًا. Before his creation, he didn't exist. لَا وُجُودَ لَهُ. He had no prior existence. فَلَيْسَ الْإِنسَانِ قَدِيمًا. So man is not qadim. Yani, he is not something that has no beginning. فَكُلُّ الْمَخْلُقَاتِ لَيْسَتْ قَدِيمًا. All of the creation is not qadima. Yani لَهَا بِدَايَةً. Everything from the creation has a beginning. وَالْأَوَّلْ هُوَ اللَّهِ. And the first is Allah. الَّذِي لَيْسَ قَبْلَهُ شَيْءٍ. The one that there was nothing before him. وَالْمَخْلُقَاتِ مُحْدَثَةً. As for the creation, then the creation has a beginning. بَعْدَ أَنْ لَمْ تَكُنْ. It has a beginning, a point where before it had no existence. It was nothing. وَذَلِكَ بِقُدْرَةِ اللَّهِ. And that's by the power and the might of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَمِنْهَا هَذَا الْإِنسَانِ. And from those creations that had a beginning is man. فَإِنَّهُ لَمْ يَكُنْ شَيْئًا مَذْكُورًا. He was not something before that was even mentioned. This is contrary to the belief of who? In Western thought? The atheists. Right? Man has a beginning. It's not some sort of phases where he transfers from one being to the next, one species to the next. You understand? Because what do the atheists believe? Darwinist theory is evolution. Okay, and that we came from monkeys, and monkeys came from another species until it went to a single cell in the ocean or something like this. Rather, there is a beginning point for man, and that is Adam alayhi salam. ثُمَّ إِنَّ اللَّهَ سُبْحَانَهُ وَتَعَالَى خَلَقَ آدَمَ. Then Allah Ta'ala created Adam, أَبَا الْبَشَرِيَّةِ مِنْ تُرَابٍ. The father of humanity. He created him from dirt. He was like black, smooth clay or mud. And from this Allah Ta'ala created Adam. Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala said, وَلَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانِ مِنْ صَلْصَالٍ مِنْ حَمَإٍ مَسْنُونٍ. Indeed, we created man from a smoothened, darkened clay. He says, Shaykh Fawzan says, from dirt, and then from mud or clay that is smoothened or blackened. وَهَذَا مِنْ عَجَائِبِ قُدْرَةِ اللَّهِ. And this is from the amazing affairs of the power of Allah. كَيْفَ أَنَّهُ خُلِقَ مِنَ التُّرَابِ. How he was created from dirt and from clay. هَذَا الْإِنسان. This human being that has amazing things with him by the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He has a body, he has intellect, he has hearing, he has sight, vision, he has senses. Even though before that he was non-existent. كما قال الله سبحانه وتعالى لنبيه زكريا. Right? And that's important to know. Like, how does intellect come into existence from evolution and hearing and sight from a single cell? Then all of a sudden things evolve to be this very, very complex, organized senses, perceptions, and things like this. They just develop on their own. This is nonsense. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to his prophet Zakaria alayhi salam, وَقَدْ خَلَقْتُكَ مِنْ قَبْلِ وَلَمْ تَكُ شَيْئًا. And I created you from before, and before that you were nothing. فَهُوَ مَوْجُودٌ مِنَ الْعَدَمِ. So then he was brought into existence from non-existence, from nothingness. لَمْ يَكُنْ شَيْئًا مَذْكُورًا. The offspring of Adam came from a nutfa. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in verse 2, إِنَّا خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ مِن نُطْفَةٍ. So notice here the word insan is mentioned again. In verse 1, هَلْ أَتَى عَلَى الْإِنسَانِ. What is insan referring to? Man. In verse number 1, who is it referring to? Man. We created man. Adam and his offspring. In verse 2, إِنَّا خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ مِن نُطْفَةٍ. We created man. Once again, man is mentioned here, al-insan. But Allah says from a nutfa, from semen. Okay? Who is this referring to now? Man. The children of Adam now, more specifically, because Adam was not created like this. That's procreation. This is a point of confusion that Christians and non-Muslims will try to use to confuse Muslims about the Quran, or to confuse non-Muslims about the Quran. So they will take one verse to the next, talking about creating insan, man. Okay? And some verses, Allah is referring to man as being who? Adam. Other verses, Allah is referring to man as being the offspring of Adam. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about creating him from clay, and creating him from dirt. This is referring to the original creation, which is Adam alayhi salam. Then when he speaks about we created him from drops of semen or sperm, nutfa, then who is referring to? The offspring, and that's the procreation after Adam. So there's no confusion whatsoever, but they try to use those verses to confuse Muslims or non-Muslims to say that there is contradiction in your book. And this is of course not true. So in this verse we created man from nutfa. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created his offspring from a nutfa. وَهِيَ الْمَنِي. Nutfa meaning mani, sperm. أمشاج يعني مختلطة. مختلطة من مني الرجل ومني المرأة تنزل عند الجماع. مني الرجل أبيض غليظ ومني المرأة أصفر رقيق. We created a man from a nutfa, amshaj. Amshaj means mixed. That is, the male and female seminal fluid when they mix together. When they mix together. As for the male seminal fluid, the Shaykh describes it as being a whitish, thick or viscous type of fluid. And for the female, it's a more yellowish type of thin fluid. So when they come together, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates by these two fluids coming together, a male or a female. A male or a female. So you have two sexes, and that also means you have two genders. فَقَوْلُهُ إِنَّا خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانِ. And so the statement of Allah, we created man, yani the children of Adam, from mixed fluid. Then he says why? Why he created man. Why he created men and women. نَبْتَلِي. In order to test him. That is, الحكم من خلق هذا الإنسان وإيجاده أنه يبتلى ويمتحن بما يجري عليه من حياته في حياته من الخير والشر ومن السرور والحزن ومن الغنى والفقر والأحوال المختلفة. الله يبتليه ويختبره ليتميز الإنسان الشاكر الصابر الذي يشكر عند النعم ويصبر عند النقم من الإنسان الذي يكفر عند النعم ويجزع عند النقم. He said that Allah subhanahu, this is the wisdom in the creating of man and bringing him into existence for him to be tested, tried regarding the things that happen in his life, be they good, be they bad, happiness and sadness, poverty and richness, and other various different situations and occurrences in their life. Allah tests and tries the servant in order to distinguish the person that is grateful and patient, who is thankful when blessings reach him and is patient when trials hit him, testing them and distinguishing that type of person from the person who is ungrateful when the blessings reach him and is impatient when the trials hit him. Then Allah Ta'ala said, فَجَعَلْنَاهُ سَمِيعًا بَصِيرًا. We created him from mixed drops of semen, that which comes from the male and female, in order to test him. And so we made him a person, a creature that hears and sees. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him faculties. He's able to recognize good from bad. He hears and he sees. So he's a person that's intelligent and is able to distinguish between matters, meaning what is safe and what is good and what is bad, to a degree. Otherwise, what would be the purpose of revelation and sending messengers? So he needs to know legislation, right? How to worship his Lord in details. He needs to know right from wrong in details, what he's supposed to do, what he's not supposed to do, what he's supposed to stay away from. So it doesn't solely depend on rational thought. However, rational thought does, if it's good rational thought, it will never conflict with revelation, with the Quran. Good rational thought doesn't conflict with the Quran. So if it's real logic, sound logic, then it won't conflict with the Quran. However, not all logic is sound. Some logic is actually illogical. And some rational thought is actually irrational. And it's not truly sensible. So not everything that a person comes up with, an idea that sounds good on the surface, if it disagrees with the Quran, then it's irrational, actually. It's illogical and it's not good reasoning. So he has the ability to move, to earn a living, and he's equipped with everything that he needs for the masalih of this world, from the benefits and he needs to get in this world. Barakallahu feekum. This chapter here, Surah Al-Insan, it has discusses three circumstances of the human being. A time before humans, a time when he's in this life to be tested, and then also it discusses the hereafter, his life, his existence in the hereafter, his life in the hereafter. Allah begins the chapter by saying, Hal ata ala al-insan. Didn't there come? What does that mean? It's not in the form of a question, but it's actually ascertaining and affirming that it happened. Qad ata ala al-insan. Indeed, it has. There was a time that has come before man was anything that was mentioned. So man has a beginning point. As for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, huwa al-awwal, laysa qablahu shay. Allah is the first, there is nothing before him. Right? But as for all of the creation, everything else is an amazing thing when you reflect and you think about this. Everything else has a beginning. It has a beginning point. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said man here, what is he referring to? In the first verse. Adam and his offspring. Humanity as a whole. The second verse, Inna khalaqna al-insan min nutfatin amshaj. We created man from mixed semen. Who is insan here? The offspring of Adam alayhi salam. So don't let anybody confuse you regarding that. Okay? Allah said the reason why in this verse. He gives a reasoning why man was created. Man was created for, Allah created the creation for what reason? What purpose? There's three reasons. To be tested. Nabtali. Right here, this verse. And to worship him. Huh? And to know him. To get to know Allah Ta'ala. Okay? So in this verse, Allah mentions the hikmah for the creating of man. And that is nabtali. In order to try and test him. So Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala did what with the servant, the human being? He gave him certain faculties, hearing and seeing. So He made him an intelligible creature. A person that is able to distinguish between matters. Right? Recognizing right from wrong. And from there, inshallah, we'll conclude. Sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Subhanaka wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.